Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my August wrap-up and my May TBR. In August I participated in Women in Translation Month. I also participated in Faulkner in August, The Summer of Snopes, and I finished a big nonfiction book which I had started reading back in July. So a pretty good reading month for me. Oh, I also listened to an audiobook, so a pretty good reading month for me, even though I have to be honest, I do kind of feel like I'm still in a reading sort of doldrums. I'm getting books read, but rarely am I excited to go pick the book up and continue reading. There were some definite exceptions in my list this month, but I'm still feeling a little bit, I don't know, a little bit slumpish about my reading. So I'm looking forward to September, which is Shorty September, to kind of break me out of that by reading some short books, which I hope will be good. But let me start off with the wrap-up. So, like I said, I participated in Women in Translation Month, and I read 5 books for Women in Translation Month. The first one is Strange Weather in Tokyo, a novel by Hiromi Kawakami. It was translated by Allison, Markin, Powell. This novel tells the story of Tsutsiko and her relationship with one of her former teachers, who's significantly older than she is, who she just refers to as sensei, or as teacher. They meet by chance one night in a bar where Tsutsiko is drinking, where she goes to drink regularly. She runs into her former teacher, they strike up a conversation, and pretty soon they're involved in a really unusual, hard to describe, hard to pin down, still for me hard to kind of figure out relationship. And I'm not sure that the main character, Tsutsiko, is that how you say her name? I'm saying it wrong? I am. Tsukiko. I'm not sure that she even knows exactly what the nature of that relationship is. There are various points in time in the novel where she's off doing something with Sensei that she never would have done before, and she thinks to herself, what am I doing here? You know, what am I doing? And I think we, as the readers, question this. Sensei is grieving, in a sense, for his wife who died. He seems to be a person of very specific habits and rituals. He seems like to be a bit of a know-it-all. I feel like he's a little bit controlling. And in the end, the two do end up in a kind of relationship which I would describe as a relationship of limited physicality. More of a relationship of two, what I believe to be lonely people who just kind of fall into one of those orbits, and they find a certain comfort there, and they stay in that relationship. Now, if you've read this and you have different thoughts about that relationship, I would love to hear those in the comments, because in all honesty, that's a relationship I'm still trying to figure out. So the second book I read for Women in Translation Month is one that lots of people on BookTube have been reading, and that's Elena Knows by Claudia Pineiro. Pineiro is an Argentine, primarily writer of detective fiction or mysteries, I believe, and this has mysterious elements to it, but really it is, I think, a social issue drama at its heart. The main character, Elena, suffers from really debilitating Parkinson's. Parkinson's that is so debilitating that she literally cannot move without, unless her medication is kicked in, and her medication is helping her to move. And her daughter Rita has died. The police have ruled it a suicide. She was found hanging in the church where she attends, but Elena just knows, as the name indicates, that Rita would never have committed suicide, and she has her reasons for believing that. She sets out on a journey across the city in which she lives to find the one woman who she thinks can help her to, chase down this mystery and find out what really happened to Rita. This is a woman who Rita had a chance encounter with in the past, and Rita did something which kind of altered this woman's life. And so most of the book is Elena's kind of painstaking process for how she, takes her medicine and how she manages to navigate her way across town, and people who help her and people who don't, to arrive at the door of this woman who she hopes will help her to solve this mystery. There is a social issue at the heart of this novel, which I won't tell you because I think it's somewhat spoilery, but you may already know. But the novel really asks some, I think, incredibly topical, difficult questions about, who has the right to control your life, who has the right to decide when you live or die, and who has the right to determine those things for themselves. It's really, I think, pretty powerful, even though I thought it became relatively heavy-handed at the end. And I didn't think that the ending was handled as well as this description of Elena and her physical problems, her disease, and how she overcomes it, and the relationship that existed between Elena and her daughter Rita, which was not a particularly pleasant one. So, a really good book, I think. I would recommend it. It's just that the ending for me felt a little bit too forced and, like I said, heavy-handed. So the third book that I read for Women in Translation Month was The Years by Annie Ernaux. This is kind of a memoir, sort of a look into the history of France at the end of World War II and French culture and society as it emerged and changed over time, and as we have to presume, Annie Ernaux evolves and changes over time. And I thought it was really an interesting way to structure a memoir, so that it's not just a memoir of one person's life, even though it is definitely that, but it's a memoir of France as it changes over the course of the author's life, a memoir of different elements of French society, different ideas about politics, about consumer products. Nothing like a stealth knock on the door and then dogs going crazy. Anyway, so like I was saying, it's a memoir of France as it changes in the post-World War II years, a memoir of the author, we presume the author's own life, a memoir of kind of changing ideas of society involving consumerism, sexual mores, the ideas of family and marriage, and government and colonialism. There's a whole lot here, and I thought it was good. I'm not sure I think it was great, and part of that I think is because a lot of the events, particularly in France's history, that Ernaux describes here are not things I think that the average American reader, and I'm assuming I am that person, the average American reader would be as familiar with or would understand why these things were so important. I know that France struggled with ending its colonial period and with Algeria and all kinds of things like that. And I know how important that is in French history after World War II. But exactly kind of all the ramifications of it that Ernaux goes into are not things necessarily that I get, and I can only then relate it to Vietnam. I thought the writing was good, and I think one interesting thing, and I pointed this out when I talked about the book earlier, I think one interesting thing about the book is that when Ernaux is talking about events that happen in France, in ways, French kind of history, her writing style is really just repertorial, almost like reading newspaper headlines or short, newspaper snippets or blurbs. And then when she begins talking about herself and her own lives and her own experiences, we have to presume that's true because she doesn't necessarily identify herself in the book, the language becomes a lot more emotional, a lot more powerful, a lot more resonant. She organizes the periods of her life around photographs, or the periods of the person she's talking about lives around photographs, which she describes but does not include, which give you a kind of a hint or a clue about her, or at least the person she's writing about, mindset and lifestyle at the time. I thought it was really good. I do, like I said, have some caveats for non-European readers. The fourth book I read for Women in Translation Month was the absolutely delightful Disoriental by Ngar, Djavadi, and translated by Tina Cover. By the way, I forgot to mention the translator of the last two books, so let me do that now because that's unforgivable. The Years is translated by Allison L. Strayer, and Elena Knows is translated by Francis Riddle. Sorry about that. But Disoriental is translated by Tina Cover, and this tells the story of Camilla, or Kimi, Sadr, an Iranian refugee who's resettled in France as a relatively young girl, and all the things she has to go through to try to fit in to French society. That's where the name comes from. She becomes disoriental in that she essentially tries to, or has to kind of rid herself of all the traditions and customs and ideas that she would have had as an Iranian citizen to kind of more fully embrace citizenship in France. It's about her struggles as a teenager and a young woman, coming to grips with her sexuality, coming to grips with a relatively conservative, controlling family, and she tells the story of her family, the Sadr family, in Iran, where her father was a dissident both against the government of the Shah and then against the government of the Ayatollah Khomeini. and her mother's struggle to keep the family alive and intact, and her mother's issues with, and kind of the harrowing story of their escape, and then rejoining her father, and then, you know, what her father was like living in France. All told, you know, she tells us all the story while she's sitting in a clinic waiting essentially artificial insemination. Just a really, I thought, delightfully told story with all kinds of cultural information and all kinds of insights into the experience of being a refugee. And I just thought told in a really great way. I thought it was really powerful and really enjoyable. So this is probably the best of the women in translation books I read this month. And then the last book I read from Women in Translation I also liked a lot, and that is The End of Days by Jenny Erpenbeck and translated by Susan Bernofsky. So The End of Days is my second Jenny Erpenbeck book. The first I read was Visitation. And in Visitation, what Erpenbeck does is she kind of traces the history of a piece of property and a home through German history, from, you know, pre-German unification all the way through World War II, and all the occupants of this house, and kind of the way in which the house, that property, features into their lives and how they alter and change it, and the process. She kind of tells the history of Germany, and Erpenbeck, I believe, is from East Germany, and so she tells that history. In this book, there's something similar, only instead of focusing on a piece of property, she focuses on the life of one person. And she focuses on the life of that one person and imagines both that person's death over and over again under different circumstances, and then, you know, what that death would have done to the people close to the person who died, and then the ways in which that person escaped. And so this novel is set, I believe, on the border, on the Austrian border with Poland. And it's set in Vienna, and then set in Moscow, and then set in East Berlin. And I just thought it was really thought-provoking and remarkable. At times it's very poignant and powerful. At times it is comical. I believe there's some satire, and part is really kind of about grief and the loss of life, and, you know, somewhat ironically, since I made a video about this, about what remains of us after, both physical and in the memories of those who loved us. And so we see this person as a baby and their death. We see them as a teenager and their death. We see them as an adult and then their death. And then, you know, and each time there's a change. Erpenbeck includes a little short chapter in which she talks about, you know, how things would have been different, or how that she might have escaped the death that was described in the previous chapter. I just really thought it was really very good. I think I like it better on the whole than Visitation, but a really very good book. So those are my 5 Women in Translation reads this month. I also, as I mentioned, I believe, in my last Saturday Hodgepodge, I finished Africa's World War by the journalist Gerard Prunier, which looks at the war that took place in Zaire, which became the Democratic Republic of the Congo, following the Rwandan genocide. And this is an incredibly detailed kind of insider look at all that, in which I think Prunier does a remarkable job of tying in all the different groups, all the African countries, their motivations for getting involved, the problems created by the United States and France and the world. Anyway, it's just an incredibly involving, very detailed work of history, a very academic work of history, which comes with, you know, hundreds of pages of notes. I just thought it was really good and impressive. It's about a subject that I like a whole lot. And then the other book I read, the other book I will have finished reading by the time you see this, it's Wednesday, this will go up on Thursday, is The Mansion by William Faulkner. This is the third in the Snopes trilogy, the third book Faulkner wrote primarily about Flem Snopes and the Snopes family, which comes to, I think, in the terms of one of the main characters, Gavin Stevens, infest Yoknapatawpha County and the city of Jefferson. So this, as I said, is the third book. We read all 3 novels, one in June, one in July, this one in August. I'm hideously behind. I still have 100 pages to go. Like I said, I will finish that today. And I realized after watching Roz from Scarlett About the Books video, which she talked about this, I realized that when I finish this book, I and the other people involved in the Faulkner and August read-along will have read 1,100 pages of William Faulkner. between the beginning of June and the end of August. And I believe Roz asked, is that too much Faulkner? And the answer might be yes, even for me. And I will say right now that I have real reservations about this novel. It feels bloated to me. It feels like Faulkner is trying to tie up some story ends that he had left over, trying to include some stories which he may or may not have written in other places and tie it all together. And to be honest with you, there is very little plot here. I have a feeling the plot is all going to get tied up in really dramatic ways. This is a reread for me, by the way. But right now, it just feels like he is doing that Faulkner thing where he chases a lot of rabbits in all kinds of directions, which may or may not be important to the ending of the book. But I'm looking forward to getting finished with that. I also listened to The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I finished listening to that, and I would just say my reaction to Scarlet Letter is meh, and I'll leave it at that. To me, I guess I won't leave it at that. To me, Hawthorne's writing style is ponderous and overly detailed and verbose. And while I found the story to be powerful, it feels incredibly also, I think, out of date with the world today. And I can't imagine if I was talking with in the comment section of my last video with a cousin from Always Doing. And she had read this, I think, when she was in the 8th grade or 7th grade. I can't imagine if I were a 7th or 8th grader picking this book up today and being able to read it and to relate to it on almost any level. It is literally describing a world which no longer exists. And you may think it's a shame that that world no longer exists, but that world no longer exists. And so I found it to be, I'm glad that I listened to it. I'm glad that I've now, listened to the story on audiobook so that I know, what it's about and I can talk about it. But it is not, in my mind, a book that we should be giving to young people unless we want to discourage them from reading. Anyway, there you go. There is my August wrap-up. And so now on to the September TBR. Like I said, I'm going to be kind of focusing on Shorty September this month. I'm not following. I don't know if there's a set of prompts you're supposed to do. I never do those anyway. But I am going to be focusing primarily on Shorty September with one notable exception. For my birthday, my son gave me a gift card so that I could buy books, and I bought The Colony by Audrey McGee. This is a book which is long listed for the Booker Prize. I don't know if it's going to make it onto the short list. I think they're announcing that soon. But it's the book that I've heard the most reviews of, which is the book that I haven't read on the list that I most want to read. So I'm going to start off the month by reading that. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I really like this beautiful dust jacket, which I don't say very often. So then Shorty September. Well, I'm going to do some things for Shorty September, which I'm not sure are necessarily Shorty September things. I'm going to read some short stories. I'm going to read more of the short stories in this collection by Edna O'Brien called Saints and Sinners, because Edna O'Brien, I believe, Edna O'Brien is an Irish writer. I love Irish writers. I love Irish short story writers. And Edna O'Brien is somebody I've read not nearly enough of, so I want to do that. Also this month, I want to read some of Dorothy Parker's writings. I have found this really cool portable Dorothy Parker at Half Price Books a while back, and so I'm going to read some of her stories and some of her other material that's in here, so that I can know more about Dorothy Parker's writing. And then on to kind of the crux or the heart of Shorty September. I'm going to read Somebody Loves You by Mona Archie. I saw Jen at Remembered Reads had listened to this as an audiobook recently, and she recommended that it might be better to read this because of the form the book takes and the way it's written. This is a book that I got as one of the books I bought because it was on the Republic of Consciousness Prize long list, and that is I think that's the only prize I really pay a lot of attention to. It is a short book. I have no idea what it's actually about. It's 162 pages long, so that would be one book. Also, Jack the Rambling Raconteur gave me a recommendation about where to start with the works of Bessie Head. I believe she's the writer from Botswana, and so he suggested I start with her book When Rain Clouds Gather. Certainly really looking forward to this. I've had Bessie Head on my list of authors that I want to read for a long time, so thanks to Jack for recommending a place for me to start. And I believe this book is 183 pages. I also want to read Another P.D. James mystery novel, and this is An Unsuitable Job for a Woman. It's part of the Cordelia Gray mystery series, or it's a Cordelia Gray mystery. James only wrote 2 Cordelia Gray mysteries. This is the first. But she's essentially was attempting, I think, to create a new detective, in this case a woman, who I believe works as a private detective, unlike her primary detective, Adam Dalgleish, who populates most of her mystery novels. I haven't read either of the Cordelia Gray mysteries, and I want to read this one this month. And then one more mystery I want to read, have on my list, and that is A Rage in Harlem by Chester Himes. It's a Harlem detectives novel. It comes in at about 160 pages. I read The Real Cool Killers this year, and I really liked it. So I'm really looking forward to getting to another Chester Himes mystery and the 2 detectives involved in this, whose names I can't remember right now. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading this as well. So not a particularly ambitious September TBR. Oh, I'm also still reading the memoir, Salman Rushdie's memoir of the time he spent in hiding, called Joseph Anton. Still reading that as well. Anyway, there you go. There is my May wrap-up and my September TBR. If you've read any of these books, have any thoughts about anything I've said in these books, I look forward to hearing them in the comments section below. And as always, thank you for watching.